All right, top of the hour. We will ask and answer the first question. Alper not here. How big has GitLab.com become since March? Question 7 of a week ago. How big is GitLab.com? Sorry, not a week ago, months ago. I don't know that we have those on hand where we could answer those on the fly, but if we can gather that
around the editor.
Pardon? If we can get to that throughout the call, if anyone wants to grab those, we can populate that and come back. All right, and I'm going to actually hand off the next question. Dave Smith, you're on the call. If you want to ask and answer that one, I will actually work on getting us live streaming because I just got an error from YouTube. So if you're able, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so another one from Alper. What are some recent and upcoming challenges and exciting developments you're facing? Ooh. I'm gonna have to pause for a minute. If anybody else on SRE team has some immediate things, I'm gonna collect my thoughts.
Well, like upcoming changes and developments, like I feel like there's always a lot. And so we're answering number 2, correct? Like I'm not
Yeah,
crazy.
that's correct.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. So I would say that at least recent challenges has been putting things into Kubernetes. I was not super involved in that myself, but there's been a huge effort to start moving our things towards running in Kubernetes as much as possible. We've already done that with the registry, and I believe Mailroom is next. And if you're not familiar, Mailroom is what works, how reply by email works. John Wood says that Geo is both exciting and challenging, and I would agree with that. That is definitely been a big challenge over the past year, and probably more, of getting that to work with GitLab.com, given its massive scale. And you know, a lot of the uses of Geo we've seen have been like one server to another, and we have like I think like 300 servers or something. So it adds a whole new level of complication. But we do want to do that. That's coming soon, I believe.
And I think at a high level too, just to try to list some of the challenges, I think both the GKE is both exciting and challenge. We've dealt with some abuse in CI too, that to be as transparent as we can be if we're doing a live stream, that creates some toil both on the SecOps team and on the SRE team. So we've dealt with some of those kinds of things, and I think as we start to go into Q4, we're continuing to try to push as much as we can on availability, you know, at our higher level OKRs. So I think rather than dive into that, just to keep time going, Clement, you want to go ahead and verbalize yours?
Yeah, I was wondering, what are the biggest pain points that SREs currently face? It might have some overlap with the previous question, but just anything more specific would be great.
Hey, Drew, you have a hot mic.
Let me try that again. Sorry. I was wondering what's the biggest pain points that SREs currently face?
I'd prefer to have one of the ICs answer that. I think we've done a good job aggregating this, but there are a few of you out there.
Okay, I'll jump in on this one. So I'd say that because we have an on-call rotation where at any given time during the week, one SRE is responding to incidents and alerts and whatever may go wrong in production, that keeping track of everything that's happening in GitLab.com is a challenging thing, at least for myself, where you want to work on projects, make progress, but you also need to be ever vigilant, aware of all the other changes that are coming in, both from changes from other SREs on how GitLab.com is built and operating, as well as with developmental changes that are coming in with the GitLab product and how it changes, so that whenever you are on call, you can be somewhat informed to know, if not how something works, who to talk to figure out how to solve it quickly and get things up and running very quickly. To me at least, that's a very challenging thing that we confront all the time.
I'll also say that as one of the newer members on one of our SRE teams, when you go on call, there's a lot of information about things that are happening within the GitLab application ecosystem and infrastructure, and keeping track of all of that stuff is difficult, but it becomes easier over time. But then also it's difficult to distinguish signal from noise and be sure that you're reacting to something that is relevant or important, and not just something that is sort of a red herring. So the issue with that then becomes that over time your experience leads you to become better tuned into things that are important and relevant, and at the same time then you become potentially less able to respond to things that may be relevant but look like noise and things that you've seen before that may not have been quite so relevant, right? So it's important to not ignore certain signals that are coming in, especially if they're important. But sometimes sometimes they may not appear to be as as relevant.
Thanks.
Anyone else before Dave or I chime in on the topic?
I think we could move to the next question maybe too, unless you had something to add.
I can echo some of Nell's points. I think with the pace of development, we've made ideological, philosophical changes to availability and security over velocity, but for a good while there, keeping track of what was related to a new feature, possibly a release or a recent feature flag that was flipped, it was difficult to get that signal to noise ratio down because certain things were new users' behaviors that were a response to new things they could do, and trying to do that based on experience as opposed to perhaps what the product facing engineering teams may have had as insights available to them is a very different experience for us. All right, moving on to number 4. And we've got some updates on metrics from question 1 that we'll come back to afterwards. And I also, just for those who heard me speak about YouTube Unfiltered, it will be uploaded afterwards. Live streaming is currently still broken. All right, number 4, how can the wider community contribute to stuff SREs are working on? We have a separate project tracker with issues in the GitLab-com space. It's GL-infra. Our main tracker is named infrastructure, but we also have the production tracker. So we can always take a look there, see what new issues are coming up. The dashboard that we're looking at often for on-call uses the SRE:on-call label. That's global to the GitLab-com group space, so you can see things there.
And then I was adding the link to the InfraDev dashboard where we have issues that as we find things that are wrong in GitLab.com, wrong is not the right word, as we find problems in GitLab.com, we could use help with development on, be it from either in the community and from the engineering team. There's a dashboard of issues there that I think trying to answer the question to the wider community, those sets of issues for GitLab as a product are things we're prioritizing to get help with.
All right. Brad, are you on? Can you ask?
Yeah, so I've got one answer there, but what's the biggest technical debt in .com, in your opinion?
Thank you. Ben, would you like to answer that question?
Sure. Yeah, no, our biggest technical debt is the Chef infrastructure that drives all of the way we deploy things. We're working on moving over to Kubernetes to get rid of that giant pile of technical debt. You know, I look at some of the, you know, they asked how big is GitLab.com, and I look at the, say, CPU and memory metrics, and yeah, we have 20 terabytes of memory and almost 5,000 CPUs, but because of the way Chef is deployed, it's all on a server by server basis, and that strands a lot of resources. So we're only really utilizing half of the resources that we're giving the system, and switching to Kubernetes is one, getting rid of that stranded resource problem is one Kubernetes technical debt thing that'll be solved. Other things like being able to do deployments in a more quickly, being able to scale more quickly, those will all be solved by moving to Kubernetes.
All right, and Jarv adds a point about secrets management. Jarv, interrupt me if you want to expand on that. We're rolling out Vault. We've deployed this to GKE. We've got a proof of concept out there. This will be used for cert management as well, but in time, we will move all of our secrets there. The long-term planning also depends a lot on how we manage Kubernetes secrets and how quickly we start moving services to GKE. But I agree, Chef is pretty bad. Right? Anything else anyone else wants to add to that list? Chef is the clear winner. Yeah, I think that's about right. Thank you, Brad. Jeff M., would you like to verbalize your question?
Sure. I'm new to the company and just wondering if the SRE team in general is only focused on the GitLab as a product or platform, or if you guys are responsible for other IT kind of functions within custom developed tools that we build in-house or third-party vendors that are related to what we're doing but not necessarily under our control, and what you guys are responsible for and not responsible for.
Thank you and welcome. Dave, I'll let you take that. You are closer to all of the vendor relationships.
Sure. I wouldn't say that in trying to carve out, it's probably a big answer. So in trying to carve out things, I don't know that we develop integrations or anything in particular. Jarv noted we are using GKE and we're engaged in trying to dog food as much of the product as we can. There are certain pieces of what the infrastructure team beyond just SRE owns, in that historically the production and now SRE team has owned the running environment and infrastructure for customers.gitlab.com, forum.gitlab.com, design.gitlab.com, and we've been trying to get those more back into engineers' hands. So we actually have some work that we did just finish moving version out of AWS from a VM there into GKE running inside of GCP and starting to use auto DevOps there. And the same is true that we had a separate cluster for design.gitlab.com. We'd like to move some of those back in that direction and use gitlab.com to run some of those custom applications. So there's a little bit there, but then other like custom integrations with gitlab.com to things like Jira and other things like that, that's really in product, would be a helpful answer. Is there anything more I can give you a little bit more scope on, Jeff, or did that help?
I think that helped, and the infrastructure and production differentiation helped for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Looks like Chester was up next. Did you want to go ahead and verbalize your question?
Yes. Hey, hi, how's it going? I've been working with more customers that have expressed interest in moving to .com. So just curious to know how the SR team and the professional services team work together to help customers migrate over.
Sure, and I think I'll go ahead and take this one too. I think that there's actually an overlap between professional services and customer success / support and SRE. In the past, we actually have done that. And sorry, thanks for typing those. I started to type an answer, but I realized I should talk. That we do have some support members and ways for other people to get into the console servers and do imports. So I think we're trying to expand that beyond just SRE. I think the scope of the infrastructure / SRE team is going to be to help build the infrastructure that we need to do that and enable professional services or customer success to be able to do those migrations directly. I think so the scope of that is I'd love to help like scope out a project and do a better job of enabling your teams to do it directly themselves and be able to schedule that. I think our only concern after that would be just managing resources so that we're not doing 10 big imports at a time or something like that, where we may hammer the database or something like that. Anything else you want to ask, or is that enough?
Oh, that's all. Thank you.
Cool. Brad, looks like you were up next.
So do you, along those same lines, do you have any concerns of very large .com customers, actual paid group customers? What are your concerns, if any?
So I'll just issue a quick warning. This will be posted up to YouTube, so no customer names here on the call. There are concerns amongst many who are investigating and exploring using .com because we are a multi-tenant platform. So there's not a easy solution to the noisy neighbor problem. And sometimes we're the worst offenders, being very heavy users of .com ourselves. So the biggest concern, paid group or not, just size of usage, has most to do with how do we protect users in a certain namespace from impacting the availability for users of a different namespace. Private Runners solves this for a number of folks, but it's the whole head-to-toe .com offering that we're concerned with.
Yeah, I'd like to add, since you mentioned runners, I think those are a point of concern because, we obviously have the shared runners that have limited capacity, so we have to be concerned about contention there. But even if customers bring their own runners, we have had in the past a lot of trouble with them hitting the API, requesting jobs in so much that it causes problems for everyone on the API. So as an example, that's an example of a big customer problem, which we've even had recently. We have API limits in place to deal with that, but when you have a big enough customer, they were like, well, can you whitelist us because we have so many runners? And that's all.
Thank you.
All right, Sid, you're next.
Well, thanks. What would you like to see in GitLab to help with Terraform? I think a lot of our customers are using Terraform too. Seems to be the default way to kind of manage Kubernetes. Like if you have Kubernetes clusters, you instantiate them and then networking with Terraform. I've seen issues, for example, to make sure that only one Terraform job runs at the same time. So that could be something GitLab enforces. What do you need to help GitLab work better with Terraform?
I mentioned one issue that I think you were referencing there, Sid, which is limiting pipeline execution to one at a time. I know this is a popular issue in the community, and it's something that we would like to use as well. This is probably our biggest one. I don't know if there are any other big issues we have with Terraform and GitLab. We run Terraform and CI currently. We also run other things like our like Kubernetes through Auto DevOps, or just Kubernetes runs all are done in CI, as well as Chef runs, and all these could benefit from having control over having one pipeline running.
Awesome, and glad to see that scheduled.
Cool.
Yeah, recently I believe we turned on merge trains for some of our own workflows as well. And that's helped us to keep that sequential one at a time, one change after another, especially with looking at plans and seeing what's going in.
That's an interesting one. With merge trains, is this the same as merge trains? I don't think so, but that's interesting.
Yeah, a lot of folks have considered or referenced, I believe, I'm not used it, it's Atlantis, I believe, is that correct? Yeah, a similar product that effectively offers the same workflow controls. It's more geared towards only Terraform, but we've achieved functionally more or less the same basic features using DAGs and merge trains with GitLab CI.
Cool. I think merge trains are meant to like make sure that you test on master, but it's you can have things kind of deploying in parallel with it. So that will be something for us to look into.
This is something that affects the distribution team as well. As a part of our cloud native charts, every time we merge into master, even if things have been tested prior to merge, we may have 2 or 3 MRs that go in within 15 minutes, and we end up having 1 or 2 of those pipelines on master fail because they're in the middle of running full spec.
Yeah, makes sense to me. By the way, make sure all of this is in the issue as well, because I don't see Atlantis mentioned in the issue. So it would be kind of cool to mention like, hey, is this the same as merge trains, or is it in addition, or your problems, Jason? Would be great to have them in there too.
All right, can do.
Yeah, I know there's an environmental locking issue out there. I'll find that link in there as well. Concept of locking an environment during a deploy and then unlocking it to allow the next deploy.
Not familiar, but I'll have somebody on our team follow up with you.
Yeah, no, I'll find it, Anthony. I'll link it into your issue.
Thanks, Brennan. All right, DT.
Hey there, DT Solution Architect, Silicon Valley. Good morning from a sunny Santa Cruz, California. 2 things. One is often in the field working with customers, we are asked, who's your biggest customer? And so when I showcase GitLab, and I get really excited to showcase GitLab, I love using .com as an example. And I took a page from Hayden's playbook. And when I showcase .com, I love mentioning some really good proof point stats. So at the top of this doc, we're at 10 million projects, 4 million users, petabytes of data. That kind of like, those kind of stats help bring the temperature down of like, can you manage our mono repo that we've had for 15 years? So please keep these stats updated. Love having those in the field. There was 2 things I was asking at the top of there. One is the number of nodes in the number of nodes in the infrastructure. I think 300 was the last stat I had, and then there's the first time I've heard of like the mention of memory. So 21 terabytes of memory. Kind of curious, like if you did a pie chart, what are the big swatches of where that memory is used and applied in the infrastructure? Thank you.
Thanks for that. I put a couple comments here. One is that we're mostly CPU bound on the front end, so we have a lot of unused and memory that is pretty wasteful, especially as we're going to be migrating to Puma, which is already on Canary. We're seeing the memory cut in about half because we have much fewer workers. So moving to Kubernetes is sort of what we're thinking is going to help with the allocation of resources. It's just going to make it a lot easier for us to more efficiently allocate memory and CPU in the front end of the fleet. On the back end, I just put a note in here for our Git storage tier. This is fairly over provisioned just because of the way GCE works, in that they allocate IOPS for SSD by the node size, by the number of cores. So this was something that came up during the migration to Google. We ended up having to like severely over provision these boxes because of that. As far as a breakdown, kind of a detailed breakdown of the allocation, I don't think we have anything like that handy, but maybe I can point you to some dashboards.
Yeah, cool. I'm just kind of curious. It was something new I've heard. So thank you.
Hey, John, do you have any idea of like what percentage of our costs those GitLab servers are? Is that like 20% or is that like 50%?
It's a very large cost because SSD is just our biggest cost. So I would say like the servers themselves, when you're talking about compute, are probably not that much compared to SSD. And then beyond that, then we have, if you include runners, which is like the biggest line item in our cost for Google, I mean, it's small. So I would say like the runners come first, then probably SSD, and then after that we would have compute.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Also, surprisingly, wanted to add that the Postgres database is now a significant chunk of this. It's 1/3 of the memory allocation in production because we have to have such very large nodes because Postgres does not scale horizontally at all.
All right, John W., can you please verbalize your question?
Yeah, so I know API performance is a problem that plagues our self-managed customers. So I would assume it plagues, and Alex was talking about this earlier, it plagues .com as well. How is the SRE team working with engineering to help address API performance?
Can't speak directly to the team. I don't know if Marin's on, but I know we are actually creating a scalability team underneath infrastructure, which will have some SRE on it and some backend developers. So I wanted to put up the link to the handbook to that team that's forming around that area right now. I think that's one piece of that. And then I see Jarv also linked again the InfraDev issue board that is also, again, when we find areas that we're violating SLO in terms of how fast we think the API should be responding. We are linking issues onto that board, and that's a cross-team meeting across both engineering and SRE. There's a document linked for the agenda of that meeting along with that board where we prioritize issues. So I think those two areas in particular are what we're doing right now. And then I see Mech commenting too. Mech, do you want to just go ahead and verbalize that too, or are you okay just typing?
Yeah, thanks. So in that meeting, we're also focusing on the performance bugs from endpoints specifically while testing out our reference architectures, especially the 25K and 50K family.
Cool, thank you. Looks
like,
we're at the end of our time. Yeah.
So yeah, we actually go to the top of the hour, so I think we can probably just read this last one, and then we'll take the next questions in 6 weeks' time. How many SREs are there at GitLab right now? We have 1,000 employees at the moment. Once we double the number of employees, do you expect to double the number of SREs as well? Or are your scaling plans different? We have 20 SREs at the moment, and the fiscal year 21 plan is not something that I've seen yet for expansion. We have an open rec for a senior director, and I expect the actual composition of the team will largely be for that person to decide. So total number of SREs likely to be determined, but there will be more. So thank you everyone for joining. Have a good Friday.